The story begins with a death row convict robbing the local bank in a town near USA-Mexican border. He shoots the bank guard while running and escapes in a car with 2 bags full of cash. While driving the car, he hears news about how he escaped from prison just hours before his execution by faking illness, then killing the doctor and prison guard with the prison guard's gun and escaping in the doctor's car. The news also tells how he was convicted for the murder of 3 young women and alerts local policemen about his escape and that he is armed. Listening to this, the convict laughs, saying that he's not just armed, but rich. Suddenly, he notices a state trooper chasing him through the car's side mirror and speeds up. After a few seconds, he didn't see the trooper through the mirror, but then saw that he was at his car's tail. The trooper fired at the convict, but the convict managed to swing his car and made the trooper lose his balance. The trooper falls down, but then picks up his bike and starts chasing the convict again. After some time, the convict notices the trooper and decides to end things once and for all. He turns the car around and charges towards the trooper. He starts a shootout with the trooper and manages to shoot one of his bike's tires, which causes the trooper to fall off his bike. The convict stops his car and laughs at the trooper, but notices the trooper's bike charging towards his car, and manages to get off the car before the bike crashes into the car. Somewhere along, a vulture notices the crash between the bike and car and flies towards the scene. The convict gets up, picks up the bags of cash, and notices the trooper and thought he was dead and left. He took a map in the car to look for directions and find out that he still has to go 25 miles to reach the Mexican border. The trooper actually was not dead and got up. The convict notices the vulture and tells it that he's off menu and points at the trooper, saying that it could have him, and starts walking towards the border. The trooper gets up and notices the car crash. After not finding his body near the crash site and finding the convict's footprints, the cop decides to track him on foot. The convict finds a spot to sit and then notices the vulture following him and shoos it away. The trooper finds the convict and fires at him. The convict manages to escape but leaves behind 1 bag of cash for the trooper as a bribe. The trooper reaches the spot and notices the bag of cash. The trooper empties the cash from the bag and shouts to the convict that he will take him down. The convict notices the vulture near him and curses it as to why it didn't feed on the trooper when he was down. But then, he notices a signboard which was fallen. After erecting the signboard, he finds out that it is pointing towards a bar nearby and proceeds to walk towards the bar. After some time, the trooper too reaches the board and finds out the directions to the bar, and he too starts walking towards it. The convict reaches the bar but finds out that it is an abandoned bar. He tries to find food and water there, but couldn't find either. Suddenly, the trooper comes from behind him and asks him to surrender. But the convict gets up and starts fighting with the trooper. The trooper manages to handcuff the convict and himself together, but the convict gets hold of the gun and shoots at the trooper. But before dying, the trooper swallows the key to the handcuff. The convict tries to free himself from the dead trooper, but to no avail. He curses himself that he is in the middle of a desert, with no food and water, and handcuffed to the trooper, with nothing to help him free himself. He finds the vulture seated on a signboard outside the bar and tries to shoot it out of frustration, but the gun was out of bullets. He then notices the signboard, which said that the Mexican border was just 6 miles away, and decides to walk towards the border by carrying the dead trooper along with him. While walking towards the border, he talks to the dead trooper, boasting about how he killed the women and how he escaped. After walking for a long time, enduring desert storms, the convict finally comes to a hill. After climbing the hill, he sees the Mexican border. He starts rejoicing, but slips and falls down due to the weight of the dead body of the trooper. There he sees the vulture and becomes frustrated. In his frustration, he asks the bird why it won't eat the trooper. Then he decides to get rid of the trooper's dead body, as it was pulling him down. He wouldn't be able to cross the border with it. He looks around and finds the trooper's badge. He decides to make a makeshift axe with a wooden log nearby in order to cut the trooper's hand away. After making the makeshift axe, he takes it in his hand and marks his spot on the hand of the trooper's dead body to cut it away. But he misses his spot and instead cuts his own hand and accidentally falls off the cliff. But due to the dead trooper's body, he is still hanging onto the cliff. He looks up and finds the vulture. Suddenly, he falls off the cliff after his wrist split and gets injured at the bottom of the hill, with his hand being cut and faints. When he wakes up, he sees that the vulture is hovering around him and he is injured with his hand cut and unable to move. Then he watches in horror as the vulture begins to eat him alive, and he ultimately suffers a horrifying death, and thus the story ends. If you like the video, then hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Plotcraft.